and let us reason together. Let us reason together tonight about how we deal with our elders, for every one of us stands on the shoulders of those who have gone before. Yet in the middle of that, we find an absurd surge in people that abuse and actually kill their own parents. This is the third installment of elder abuse, and I want to continue on from what you started to talk about last week. Rick?
Well, you know, as I was saying last week, Ed, this is such an incredibly quiet yet broad sweeping epidemic in America that I liken to call it the secret war against seniors in America. And well, adult children who murder their parents for profit. And I promised my family, after a family meeting at my mother's funeral, that to make some meaning of the tragedy in our family about how my mother was neglected, deprived at times of food, water, medicine, and even communication with other family members, and phone inactivated in order by certain people in the family to get the estate. My mother's funeral was in January, and I'm telling you, there's been little to no communication from people who are squatting in my mother's home right now. They have allowed, even the day of the funeral, they did not allow hardly anybody to come to the house. And they haven't discussed anything with family members about what's going on. You know, we attempted, different family members, to reach out, and at no time, and this is what made us suspicious, at no time did they agree to meet, sit down like civilized human beings, and discuss any arrangements about my mother's health care while she was still alive, and they, even while she was alive, would not allow any visitors except for their friends and some of these people who had criminal records. So this made us very, very suspicious. Mm-hmm. And I talked in the last show about warning signs.
Yes.
And, you know, one of the phone calls, there were several suspicious phone calls, but one I'll never forget that's rather haunting. So my mother called, well, actually, my sister called, and I heard my mother screaming in the background. And she was trying to quiet my mother down. And then she hurriedly got off the phone and said, "I got to call you back." Put the phone down. And about 7 minutes later, there was another phone call. And my sister said, "Well, Mother wants to talk to you." And I heard my sister whispering in the background, tell him that my daughter's going to be living in the house. And my sister would repeat, literally, to my mother, everything that she wanted my mother to say. She would whisper it, and I heard all of this. And as it was being dictated, finally, after my mother finished saying everything that this sibling wanted to be said, then she said, "Well, tell him goodbye now." If you ever have a situation where things are going on like that, you need to do an immediate intervention. And not just phone intervention. I recommend that the best way to try to foil these types of things, you need to go there in person, unannounced, and when you do not leave until you gain entry into that home, no matter what it takes. Get inside that home. If you have any suspicion, and about 2.5 years ago, well, I attempted to do 2 interventions in that way. About 2.5 years ago, about 2 years ago, I did one of the interventions like that.
Resulting in?
I arrived there in this small southern town, unannounced, and my sibling was on their way to a fun-filled weekend out of town. And I called my mother, and she answered the phone. And she was happy, elated, but I sensed a certain amount of sadness. And she called my sister, she turned around, came back to town. And she was not happy to see me. In fact, she kind of told me off, and she hadn't seen me in 2.5, 3 years. That was our first meeting. So she drove me to the house, and I stepped out of the car, put my bags on the porch, and she left. What I saw when I gained entry to the house was a cross between, the rooms looked like dumpsters, boxes everywhere. There was fast food bags laying on the floors of practically every single room. When I pushed open the door of my mother's room, the gnats were so thick I had to wave them away with both hands. And there was rotting food on plates on the floor and on the bedstand. And my mother rolled over. I'll never forget the look. She smiled and she yelled my name, and then she began weeping. I was so distraught, so distraught. And there were a couple of interventions like that, and trying to work with the authorities and restraining myself because I was so angry. I was at the point where I literally wanted to take, for my mother's sake, justice into my own hands. And had it not been for Tops taking off pounds sensibly and achieving the status of King Runner-Up and King of Southeastern Michigan and representing the organization at an international event, and prayer partners and people at Renaissance Unity Church, I know for a fact, also without the prayers of Narvi Fair, I would have wound up in the Virginia State Penitentiary. Because this has been one of the hardest things I have had to deal with in my entire life. For 10 years, I helped people in mid-Michigan the day before Father's Day, do a march. It's called the Father's Day March Against Drugs and Crime.
Mm-hmm.
And my son, who is now 30 years old, I took him when he was just, wow, he must have been, we got started with this thing when he was about, well, he wasn't much older than 9, 10 years old. And the day before Father's Day, for about several years, we would march through the worst drug-infested neighborhoods in Saginaw and Flint. And we would hold workshops along with a brave woman called Yvonne Riggins, who worked for a nonprofit up there in mid-Michigan. Mm-hmm. And we had congressmen march with us. We had city council people. We had VFW posts. We had Vietnam veterans, because I felt that there was a distinct need to have a redefinition of what men do and what real men do in times of crisis. But never, never in my greatest nightmare did I believe that I would meet the devil at my mother's doorstep. And that is the drug community that follows when you have a drug-addicted sibling, spouse, niece, nephew. This is not something that is isolated. These people move in packs like wolves, followed by plagues of locusts. And they will devour every asset that a family tree has developed. It doesn't matter if it's a few years, a few cities, or over a century. It doesn't take long for them to do this. So I'm encouraging people to revisit the show from last week, mm-hmm. and look for those signs and signals, suspicious bruises, injuries, suspicious phone calls where there might be cries or screams for help, sudden change in behavior, caregivers acting suspicious, rings and other precious items from the estate missing. I will never forget, for Mother's Day, I bought a 14-karat gold ring for my mother with rubies and diamonds on it, and she wore it all the time. All the time. And it's just missing. Missing. And when I asked the people who were living at the house, relatives, no one knew anything. If you see certain issues of neglect in hospital records, such as dehydration, malnutrition, bed sores, weight loss, unattended health problems. My mother had a double knee surgery, and all of the appointments were scheduled for follow-up. There were stretches of several months where she was never taken to the doctor. All of these things I began to unravel, and they had people intercepting and misleading all over the place, every step of my attempts to do an investigation. Do not underestimate the ruthlessness of friends of relatives and relatives. Now, I'm going to tell you, I did not want to believe this myself. I was in a state of shock. But I'm in the process of writing a book. And I'm telling you, I speak of what I witnessed and what I know for a fact because I took photos of things that were done and the condition of the house. And I'm going to tell you another scam. Beware of workmen who are former boyfriends of the drug-addicted sibling or spouse or whatever the situation is, because one of the scams is to have these people come with the referral of these new fake family members, play godsons and play brothers. I have more play brothers and godsons and people I never, I'd heard of these people, but, and I had situations where they tried to sit me down over a couple of drinks and convince me to be a co-conspirator. Well, we're going to send so-and-so over and he's going to be looking at such and such. He's always there for your mama when, wasn't no money involved, but now it's the big money, and he ought to have a crack at the big money, don't you think?
Would you like to repeat that?
Well, he kind of helped your mama with this and that and these other things, but it wasn't no money involved. So if he did all of that, he should have a chance for some of the big jobs. I'm going to tell you about one of these big jobs. Man was supposed to be repairing the septic tank. Well, fortunately, one of the largest septic tank companies in the area, they were servicing the septic tank on this $350,000 home that my mother had paid like the majority of for this to be the family homestead in case anybody got in trouble, got sick or whatever. It's a family homestead. A lot of families do that.
Yeah.
But the drug-addicted sibling and their folk had decided that this was not going to be a homestead for no one except for them, their fake new family, and their drug-addicted friends and their criminal associates. So, getting back to the game, he sent the gentleman to the house to look at the septic tank. Now, the people had warned me from the legitimate septic tank company, this is a job that should only cost somewhere between $600 to maybe $1,100.
Yes.
And he warned me, you're from out of town, but I'm going to help you with this and let you know that there's several people who are going around and they're charging as much as $3,000 and they don't even have equipment. Don't you know that when the man came to do the estimate, I said, well, how much is this going to be? Well, show me what you need done. Well, I can tell you right now, this is going to be, could be somewhere between, it might be a couple of $1,000. So could it be more than that? Possibly if we run into trouble. Sure. I said, so tell me about your equipment. Well, I'm going to have to rent a backhoe. I said, you're going to have to rent one.
How long have you been in business?
Next question was, well, how you doing with your neighbors? See, because you might not have to have a permit if you just go and just, we just hook this thing up. I said, really, tell me more. I said, you know what? I'll get back with you. Oh, we can't, no, we're not going to do a deal right now. I'm going to get some other estimates. Well, don't call me. Don't call me. You call, and this guy was the play brother. You call him and set it all up with him. I told my mother, you're getting scammed. Just like you got scammed for $17,000 on the garage that never got built. just like you got scammed